What's up, everybody? It's been quite a few months off. Hope you don't mind, but I just haven't been making videos because it didn't seem like anyone wanted to watch it. So we'll try something different. I'm going to start this off, but first of all, just saying, it's New Year's Eve today, so Happy New Year's. Hope everyone had a great holiday season. Hope you enjoyed your families and everything went well for you. Because it is the darker season, so a lot of dark things can happen and people can get down and out. I'm not usually that type, but a lot of people can be. I'm actually going to make this video about the books I read this year. It's a little bit for me, more personally, because I just want to see how much I remember what I wrote. Tink, go lay down, go. Right when I start filming, right? So I've read about 33, I've read 33 books this year. It's not a lot. I usually read around 50 or so, but I've been taking it easy this year, not trying to kill myself, just reading too much. So we're going to start it off in order. And my first book I read this year was Robert A. Heinlein's Starship Troopers. I'm sure you've seen the movie. If you haven't, you should. It's a great movie. So it's actually a pretty good read. A couple boring parts, like a lot of sci-fi books can be at times, but he's got a really cool world he built here. And the movie does a pretty good justice, but it's obviously different, like they all are. After I read this, I started thinking of other movies that clearly rip this off, like Edge of Tomorrow with Tom Cruise, where they got the kind of exoskeleton suits making them super warriors. That's in here. They didn't have the dogs. There's actually dogs in here. What do they call it? I think they call it Neo dogs or something like that. Cool idea. But these dogs are they're almost like a symbiote. They're like attached to the human in some way where they're like an extension of them. But these dogs are like super dogs. I don't know. It's pretty cool. It's definitely a great sci-fi book and worth a read if you're interested. If you haven't read it, well, check it out. Maybe you'll enjoy it. And next on the list is the Yuga Shift, or just Yuga Shift. The End of the Kali Yuga, The Impending Planetary Transformation by Bibhu Dev Misra. Now, this was another really good book. Essentially, he goes through a lot of the Vedic text. Obviously, he's Indian, so he's a scholar in his own regard. I'm sure he's got a PhD or something. Well, doesn't list it, but I'm sure he's got some academic qualifications somewhere that he says that I don't remember. But he goes into the Yuga cycles, and he does the math and all the translated texts that he has and he knows about in his country. And he does the math himself that a lot of people haven't done, or a lot of bad translations and a lot of bad math back in the day. He's essentially saying 2025 is the end of the Kali Yuga, so it's going to start being, what is it? Yeah, it's even right on the cover. It's a Greek word, ekpirosis, and there's kataklysmos. So one is like a deluge, a flood, and one is like fire and brimstone, essentially. So we're coming up to one of them. So it's going to be a huge, catastrophe. We'll see. Doesn't fucking matter. This is temporary. This is a fiction, you know what I mean? So we'll go through whatever we got to go through and check it out on the other side and think about it. So he goes through the cycles. He has a lot of different cool diagrams in there that you can check out. I mean, it's a very interesting read, and he goes through. And then if you really pay attention, because he says towards the end of the Kali Yuga, because the Kali Yuga is like the lowest that humans get, right? I mean, look around you. We're pretty fucking low right now. Nobody knows their neighbor. Nobody gives a fuck about everyone. Everyone's a narcissist. Everyone's a judgmental prick, me included. I'm super judgmental. Everyone's just an asshole. Everyone's all about greed and money. If you got money, you're cool. If that means something to you, I don't give a shit how much money you got. If you're cool, you're cool. I've met homeless people that were cool as shit. Smarter than a lot of educated people I know. Anyway, basically at the lowest decline, the Kali Yuga is, we have an immense amount of wealth as far as material wealth, but up here and in here, we're at our lowest. And that rings pretty true to me. So again, it's a very good read. It's a little bit bigger of a book. It's not huge. It's 3 and change. It's nothing special. But, you know, he's got a lot of informative information in here, a lot of good stuff about the ancients, and he speaks of other cultures and their beliefs, how they, a lot of these old beliefs and religious structures, they all kind of intertwine with each other. So that was pretty cool. It's worth a read for sure if you're into that subject. Next is a little fictional novel. It's Michael Crichton's Eaters of the Dead. Now, if you know this book, you know there's a movie based off of it. It's called The 13th Warrior with Antonio Banderas. This is actually a first edition. I was lucky to get it. It's only, what year did this come out? Yeah, 76, first edition. Pretty cool. Then you got the very corny picture of Michael in the back. There you go. It's a great book. I like it a lot. I like the movie a lot as well. I thought the movie was great. I think the story goes with this book is Michael Crichton was having some drinks with his buddy, and they were talking, I think, about Ibn Fadlan's his tales with the Rus Vikings, right? It's a historical account. It's, you know, basically all from first-hand experience. He's like, I bet you can't make a book about Ibn Fadlan, but in like, what is it? About Ibn Fadlan, but in a Beowulf tale. Because that's essentially what the movie's about. It's like a Beowulf tale. So Michael Crichton's basically hold my beer, and then he just wrote out this book. And kind of wish the title of the movie was the same as Eaters of the Dead. I like that title a lot. But whatever, they changed it like they always do. But I really enjoyed it. It's a fun read. It's a fun movie. If you like either of them, check either of them out. Obviously the book's a little different than the movie, but they're pretty similar. If you watch the movie, you don't necessarily have to read it, but I'm the kind of person who likes to. So that was another great book this year. On to 4, King of the World by René Guénon. Now, if you know his name, he's basically an old mystical, esoteric writer. He does some scholarly work as well. But this book's interesting. I mean, I like a lot of these books about the inner world. They call it Agartha. They call it a lot of different things. But, you know, the Western ideals of Agartha, there you go, the royalty and pontificate. I mean, there's a lot in here. Realistically, I mean, there's got to be a couple books, I think, this year that I read about that topic, the inner world and ancient civilizations that may live in the inner world after cataclysms from the upper world where they had to escape. The Hopi Indians speak of it. They call it the little, what do they call it? Do they call it the little people, or they call it the ant people? Excuse me, the ant people. So there's a lot of that. I don't think that's in here. That's actually in the other book, Bibu Deb Mizra's book. He speaks about them as well to make some of his points more valid. But I don't remember a lot of this book, to be honest, because it was the beginning of the year, and I don't know. I guess a lot didn't just sink in, so I'll have to revisit this some other time. But I do remember it being a good read, from what I do remember. Next is Ingo Swan's Everybody's Guide to Natural ESP, Unlocking the Extrasensory Power of Your Mind. So, if you know anything about, there's a lot of different words, but ESP, what do they call it? Jeez, I'm a brain fart. Trying to find it. It's a remote viewing. Jeez, I couldn't think of it. A lot of him, because he worked with the governments, or mostly, I think was it SRI or was it CIA, whatever. One of them. Doesn't really matter. They're all corrupt. But he worked with them, and he worked with a lot of other psychics to, like, kind of project their mind into areas where they can see things that are kind of off limits. And they were pretty on with a lot of things. And this book kind of shows you techniques on how you can do it yourself, I'm of the belief that we can all do these things. We just have to practice like anything else. Some of us are just born with that switch or that filter turned off, or on rather, so they can kind of just do it. Other people, they have to really work for it because we have a lot of mental blocks, a lot of bad programming keeping us in a different state, right? But it's an interesting book. It's kind of a definitive book in the subject. It's one of those books you should read, I think. But there's also a lot of good charts he gives in there to kind of give you an idea and how to break things down on it so you can better understand it. Because, you know, a lot of these things, it's not like there's a basis for it really that you can put a finger on. So I have to make up a lot of words and new categories to try and get their point across, right? So it's an interesting read. Again, I read this earlier in the year. I remember a good portion of it. But it's a kind of a book you're going to have to read more than once to really let it sink in if you don't practice these things or just into it just for a simple read. Either way. Tink, can you please go lay down? Thank you, girl. Keep going. Keeps wanting to see what I'm doing over here. So anywho, it's another good read. He has more books out there as well. You can go check him out. I think he has a website. Yeah, ingoswan.com. Check him out. So you don't have to support Amazon's corrupt ass. Next, Awaken the Immortal Within by Jason Breshears. He's got a pretty big YouTube channel. This is not a huge book by any stretch. It's only about 72 pages. It's a good book though. You know, essentially it's just telling you who the fuck we really are and how we're in a reality. It's a fake reality, but we're all here to learn. But we are literally the immortal within. We are more powerful than we can imagine. I totally believe that. I don't believe in this weak ideology. That's why I don't use words like I can't do shit. Like, oh, I can do anything I want. It's just whether or not, if I want to do it or not. So that's why I've become really good at a lot of different things, especially with my hands, because that's my natural talent, is working with my hands. Ever since I was 6 years old, my mom said she knew I was good with my hands because when I was around 6, she said she saw me take apart the family's clock and took it apart in pieces and then put it back together and it still worked. I was fucking 6 years old. So that's interesting. But I've always had that belief, probably because I have a really good mom and she instilled things like that I can do anything. So that's something good to have growing up, right? That kind of love. So this is a very good book. It's a short book. It's not an expensive book. So it's really worth reading, especially if you're new on your spiritual path or anything like that. This can help wake you up. And it can give you, he's got a lot of great quotes from other authors like James Allen, Winston Churchill, Wallace D. Wattles. There's a lot of good people in here. Even David Icke, who I'm a little skeptical about, but to each their own. Good book. Check it out. Next, The Crowd. I mentioned this book before. A Study of the Popular Mind by Gustave Le Bon. This is a good book. It'll really open your eyes to, as the title says, the crowd, and how people act in crowds. How the crowd's only as smart as the dumbest person in it, essentially. And the way human mind and psychology can degrade within a crowd and hysteria can build up with the crowd. I mean, we've seen it. You can watch anything. You can watch mobs on TV of protesters and how psychotic they get and their rationing capability just fucking out the door. You know what I mean? They just can't. And it's all emotion based. And it's crazy. It really is crazy. I mean, it's not a huge book. It's only a little over 100 pages, like a 140. But it's got a lot in here. Criminal juries, I mean, it covers a lot. Crowds term criminal crowds. I mean, it's a very good book. It's one of this and Propaganda by Bernays and who's the other? Walter Lippmann. What is it? Public Opinion. It's another one. Good book. Check it out. Help you understand people in the crowd and why you should stay the fuck away from them. Another book, one of my favorites this year because I love this show so much when it came out. Walter Tevis, The Queen's Gambit. I want to get a first edition hardback of this, but I haven't found one for the appropriate price yet. I will let the hysteria about the show wane a little bit before I get it. This book is great. If you haven't seen the show, it's on Netflix. If you have Netflix, you can watch it. I think it's like 7 episodes. It's got Anya Taylor-Joy as the main protagonist, or the protagonist in general. She's amazing in it. The show's amazing. I think everything about it is great except one scene in, I think the first tournament she did, they have the American flag hanging up wrong. That bothers the shit out of me. Especially in the era, like I think it was the 60s. You think they're going to hang up the American flag improperly? I don't think so. Remember, your stars are always up to the left and up and to the left. Always. To the observer. So to fuck that up just annoyed the hell out of me. Everything else was amazing. The costumes, the scenery, the chess playing, it was all on point. They had real pros to work in that show. So it's really worth a read and it's worth a watch. Both. They're both really good. The book has a little bit of stuff in it I don't really like. Like there's a little bit of a rape scene. What was it? It's Jolene, her African-American friend in the orphanage. Kind of got a little rapey in one scene, which was kind of gross, but they didn't put that in the book, or in the show, which I like. They take that out, and there's a couple other things they took out, which I think worked for the show. You know, the show's already kind of dark. Like the way her mom died in the book, she didn't die with her mom. She died with her mom in the show. Stuff like that. And it really opens up your heart to her in the show. So it works for that. For a book, it works regardless because she doesn't really have to be there. You're kind of building that world in your head as you go when you're reading it. So to the reader, it's going to be different for everyone a little bit, right? Anyway, it's an amazing book. I love it. I'll probably read it a few times for sure. It was enjoyable. And it's not huge. Where are we looking? Yeah, just under 240. Yeah, 240 something. Great book. Check it out if you haven't. Worth a read. Another is a chess book, because I have been into chess a lot this year. It's like the first year I've been playing chess every single day because I just got into it last December. This is the Lüneburg variation by Paulo Morenzig, a novel. It's a great book. I really enjoyed it. It's not a huge book, but I got this book like for $9 or something, a hardback, first printing. And it's one of the only ones with the actual Swazi on it, so that's pretty cool too. The Swazi is important here because it's during World War II. So, again, there's going to be some spoilers here if you haven't read these books, but it's a great little story. It's essentially, I don't want to spoil everything, but it's essentially a young, up-and-coming, kind of enthusiastic chess player. He's in a kind of a chess scene, he's learning, and there's like this legend walking around who everyone knows, like that's the guy who's cool as shit. He's like the chess player. And he kind of gets under the wings and he gets friendly with that guy, and he goes into his personal life a bit. And the more he gets into personal life, he gets a backstory of this guy and how he turns out. He hasn't played chess in decades or something. He just goes around because he loves it so much. But he stopped playing. And he kind of stopped playing because back in the day, he used to play tournaments when he was younger. And then World War II was kicking off, so all the fucking Nazis were everywhere, ruining everything as they did. And he was a Jewish guy, so it wasn't going to work out so well for him. So playing chess, he started, one of the last turns before the war really kicked off, he was playing chess against some Nazi asshole. And, you know, he didn't want to, he was going to win the game, but he didn't want to win it, right? So he kind of just gave the game to the guy. And I think the guy knew that. But he did that to kind of get out of there because he's like the only Jew in the whole room, essentially, and everyone else was like Nazis, and it was Germany, obviously. So he was trying to place his bet so he can get out of there alive. And then when the war kicked off, he was in a concentration camp, and he ended up meeting this prick again in the concentration camp. But this time, the guy, I don't know if the guy remembered him or not, but they ended up playing like, because he found out he plays chess and something to that regard, but he ended up playing him again, I like the story because he survives, I believe, and he ended up beating the guy because he could have beat the guy the first time, but the circumstances were that, he was just fearful for his life, so he kind of just gave up the game and acted like he lost. Anyway, it's deeper than that. It's a very good book. I really enjoyed this book a lot. So if it's out there, you can find it. It's worth a read. It's not huge. What are we looking at? Yeah, 140 again. It's not a big book. 139, 140. Yep. Great book either way. And a cool picture of the author in there. You can see that. Great book. Check it out. From 97. Cool book. Next. This is one of the books I read probably every year along with the Poetic Edda from Jackson Crawford. It's probably the best modern translation. It's Sturley Sturluson's The Prose Edda. Now, Sturley, you got to take his work with a little bit of a grain of salt because he's, I don't know, what was it? A little over 200 years or so? No. Sturley's from 1179 to 1241. So the Vikings basically all converted to Christianity the year 1000. That was when they had the thing, and all the chieftains or the kings of that time essentially converted everyone and portrayed their bloodlines back to the beginning, essentially. So yeah, it's probably around 200 years after Christianity was already in. Tink, can you please go? Thank you. So about 200 years after they were already Christians, raised Christians, a couple generations of Christians, obviously, right? So you have to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt what he says in here because there has undercurrents of Christianity all over it. But there's also a lot in here you gather that you just don't really get in the Poetic Eddas, and you can see where it fits if you're paying attention. So it's most certainly worth a read, in my opinion. But I mean, a lot of the stuff you have to, because everyone goes by so many different names back in the days because the names were essentially like the Allfather Odin. His names were dependent on his fucking mood, right? He was either the wrathful, the loving, the all-knowing, the wise, or the vengeful, the Gallo. I mean, Grimnir, like, it goes on and on, right? That's why he was the Allfather, because he personifies everything. But it's a pretty good breakdown of a lot of the gods and the stories. Not all, obviously. If you want to know all, you'll never know all because we don't have any of it. Anyway, great. This is the Penguin Classic, so it's a great translation of it. I forget who translated it. Doesn't matter. It's a good read. I try and read it every year. I have a couple editions of it. That's just the cheaper one I don't mind beating up so much. Next is Immanuel Velikovsky's People of the Sea, a reconstruction of ancient history and a continuation of the Ages and Chaos series. I'm sure you've heard this name because there's a book called Worlds in Collision. It's another book. It's like the beginning of the electric universe theory, where those guys kind of get their ideas from, or where they take ideas and run with it and develop their own. But this is obviously a little different. It has nothing so much to do with the worlds themselves or the celestial bodies, but it has to do with the peoples, the sea peoples, and the Egyptians and Phoenicians, the whole North African, Middle Eastern, and Mediterranean area. So it's a pretty cool book. You kind of have to know a decent amount of history to follow this book. You don't have to know everything, obviously, but you gotta kind of know who the hell he's talking about because he doesn't always explain it in here. He just kind of throws it out there sometimes and tells you who he's talking about, but not really who they are. You got to read a lot of old scholars for that, which is some of the most boring shit in the world to read. But if you want to understand it, it's a lot to go through. But what is this? The 12th and 4th centuries. Persians, Greeks invade Egypt. The art of warfare. I mean, there's a lot in here. It's pretty cool. The dynasty of the priests. Kingdoms, Alexander, Say Amon. Sirius and Venus. Well, he does go into Venus at the end. Look at that. And you remember that. But he has, how many books are these? I think there's 3 or 4 books in this kind of series. They're all kind of connected in certain ways, as I just remembered at the very end. But again, his work's very deep because he's a real scholar. He's not, fucking around, this guy. So he knows more than I would ever know about the subject, and I could only just try and catch up. Excuse me. But it is a good read, but it's the kind of book you got to read more than once if you really want it to stick, because there's a lot of names and a lot of places, and to remember all those names and all those places, you really have to go over it. And there's Greek names for these deities or gods or kings or pharaohs, and there's Egyptian names, and there could be the same person. So if you don't know the names for both sides, you could think you're reading about 2 different people when it's the same. So things like that, you really have to try and remember and try and get it down. Like when I'm reading this, like he'll say it. He'll say the person's name, and then he'll mention it later in the Greek chapter rather than the Egyptian chapter I just read, and I have to remember the damn name. So I'll go back real quick and skip and try and do 2 or 3 times before it sinks in, and then like, all right, I'll continue from there. Because you just kind of forget and get lost. You're like, who the fuck did I just read about? It's like, right, that guy. And then you thought it was someone else the whole time. So that's where it could be a little confusing, but again, try and pay attention and hopefully it'll work out. Next. Oh, this was a fun one. Joseph, I don't even know how to say his last name. Davidovitz. I hope that's right. Why the Pharaohs built the pyramids with fake stones. The ultimate scientific proofs the rise and decline of technology. This is a good book. It's not a whole lot to explain here, but it's essentially the pyramids were built by geopolymers. So stones made from, essentially, it's like a concrete mixture, and then it cures, and then boom, you got a stone. To me, that makes a whole lot of sense, because moving up those big ass stones, we can't figure out how they did it really, unless it was some kind of ancient technology we don't know anything about anymore, or giants or aliens or whatever the fuck you want to pull out of your ass. But if it's just bags of mixtures and we're putting it in a form, then you add some moisture, you let it cure, there's your 50 ton stone. That makes a lot more sense, and it'd make more sense that way, why you really can't fit a paper through the seams or anything like that. And he gives scientific proofs of how he did it, because he actually made one of these big ass stones himself with a couple other people. It shows you exactly how and where and when. He was on TV series and everything, proving his theory. I thought this was really good, actually. I have another one of his books. This was the more modern print of this book, right? What year is this bad boy? Yeah, this is 2017, so it's the modern print of the book. His older original theory, this is not one I've read yet. This is it's just called The Pyramids, an Enigma Solved. This is from 1988, so this would be his first edition of that theory, right? So I have to get in this one too. I've read his newer work because I want to know where he left some crap out and changed first before I go back to his old stuff to see where his mind changed. So that's a good book. I really like it. It's worth reading. I'll show it again in case you missed it. It's a fun book. I liked it. And it's a little big. I don't know what big, but just under 276. Not too big. Good book, though. All right, these next 3 books are by the same author. Excuse me. James True. He's got a YouTube channel. I can't watch him too much because he says a lot of serious things, but in a joking way, and it puts me off a little bit. Like, I don't want to hear you fucking joke. Just tell me what you want to get across so I can understand what you're trying to say. That's the way I want to hear it. Sometimes he'll joke and go on tirades, and it's like, what am I watching here? Like stand-up comedy? Like, come on. But anyway, there's 3 of his books here. The Technology of Belief. Technology of Belief, Prana, Xynos, Hades, and the Apocalypse. If you don't know, that's Cleopatra on the cover. It's a great picture. I forget who drew that, painted that. Best Apocalypse Ever was the second one. And The Black-Eyed Club, which was my least favorite of all of them. It's like a novel. I didn't think it was very good, to be honest. I didn't like the ending either. It ended with a bullet going through the guy's head, I believe. The first one was my favorite, Technology of Belief. It breaks down a lot of how controlled we are in a lot of different ways, most ways. How easy it is to do it also. There's quite a few. There's 33 chapters, nice number, right? Just as many books as I read this year. Technology of Belief, Moon's Field Notes, Oracle, Delphi, Nido of Cleopatra, which is in Central Park, New York, right behind the Met. I just went there a few weeks ago. I took my mom there to check it out because it's the oldest monument in all of America. It was in Alexandria. It's fucking amazing. It's just sitting in Central Park. It's amazing. Medusa of Gorgon, The Electric Cobra, Behold a Pale Horse Ass, excuse me. Black Male and White Male, Alchemy, Airships. There's a lot in here. Satanic Messiah. Ooh. There's a lot in here, but he covers a lot of different things. CNN is the government. Government is mafia, of course. If you don't believe the government isn't a mafia or a gang, you're fucking, you don't get it. Anyway, this was my favorite of them all. I really like this book a lot. And they're relatively cheap, I believe. And not very big books, so you can read this book in a day if you're a really good reader. It's under 100 pages. Again, I'm not going to really mention this one because I didn't really care for it that much. It was just kind of a novel so he can get his ideas across in another way. And I didn't really care for the way it came out. This second one, I don't really remember at all. So I don't know how much I liked it. American Leviathan, Orange Man Sad, Propaganda Virus, New World Normal, Gifts of Baal, Lorax of Man, Eye of Ra. Some good chapter titles, but I really don't remember this book that much at all. So I'm going to have to revisit it and hopefully it'll sink in. This one I remember I liked a lot. So all three of these, this was my favorite. All right, on to the next. I'm sure everyone knows this name. Timothy Leary, The Psychedelic Experience. Excuse me, I'm not used to talking so much. This was a decent book as well. It's good. You kind of have to be a psychonaut in your own right to understand books like this. When I say psychonaut, I mean somebody that takes psychedelics and travels and really goes into psychology and their mind and all the shit most people are afraid of. They kind of jump headfirst into that stuff. I'm that kind of person. I'm terrified of taking psychedelics, but I still do it. I still do high doses every once in a while to really reset my ego and scare the shit out of myself to remind me how small I can be. Because our heads get a little too big sometimes when you get slapped around. The gods don't show up anymore to do that for us, so we kind of have to do it ourselves to re-educate ourselves. So we use plant medicines. But this book's interesting. It's about the Tibetan Book of the Dead and his translations of it and his thoughts towards it and how it's basically the Book of Death is teaching you, or they call it the Book of Death or Life, or the Book of whatever, the Egyptian Book of the Dead is teaching the living on how to go into the next world, essentially. And that's a big deal because the next book will kind of scare you about that as well. Because when you die, the Greeks used to call it the darkness, the blackness. And that scares a lot of people, I'm sure. But if your actual vision goes, so there's nothing to be registered by your brain because your eyes are just an extension of your brain, everything's black, right? Everything's out. Until your spiritual eye is opened, and then you can actually see the plane that you're at. So if you don't have that, who knows where you're going to be at? Just walking in darkness for generations? Who knows? So these are essentially kind of handbooks in that regard to help souls on their way out for an easier start into the next life. Because this is not the only life, folks. If you're an atheist, sorry, you're talking to or listening to the wrong guy here because I'm never going to be on that boat. I've seen way too many things. Anyhow, this was a trip. Interesting read. I don't remember being a very good read, as in like enthralling and really has your attention. I remember nodding off a couple times, but maybe because I've read so much on the subject and it just bores me now. But it is worth reading, and most likely more than once. So that is his book. Next, I thought was a fucking amazing book. I hate these fucking covers. These waxy covers they're coming out with. These cheap Chinese waxy covers. Hate them. 30 Years Among the Dead, Carl Wickling. This is an amazing book. And it's a dense book. You can see how fine that print is. If you don't have good eyes, you're going to hate reading this book. And it's... I don't know. It's 266 pages, but with this print, it feels like a 400-page book when you're reading it. It's just such fine print. It's just not very big. There's a lot of info on one page, and you're like, shit. But this is a really good book. It's essentially... Carl Wickling is the guy who created shock therapy. I believe that's his claim to fame, besides this book and a lot of other books he wrote. And his wife was a psychic medium. So essentially, I forget how it started. I think it started he was doing shock therapy on a patient, and he went home one day, and an entity followed him. And his wife picked up on it because I don't know if it attached to her or she just picked up on it. But she had the ability, and that's how he figured out what happened. He detached an entity from his patient, it followed his ass home, and then his wife got a hold of it, something like that. And that's how she got involved in his work. So what happens later is, excuse me. What happens later is she gets involved with his work. So together, she's the medium. So she acts like a vessel. So entities or spirits can go into her and speak through her body. And she's unaware of any of it going on. She knows she's participating, obviously, because she allowed it. But she doesn't know anything that's being said or anything like that. So when she kind of wakes up with the spirits out, she's like, well, all right, I hope it went well. But that's where he came to the conclusion, like a lot of his patients in the psych ward, they weren't necessarily crazy. They were obsessed or possessed by people. Because it turns out in his research, again, when you die, if you're a super dogmatic person or something like that, you're going to be stuck in a dogmatic view because that's what you expect in the next world, right? You expect hell, fire, brimstone, or torture, whatever bullshit they made up that's stuck in your head as life. So a lot of people go down that road, and he finds them, and he has to guide them out of that and kind of, try and convince them. And then he slowly wakes them up, and as they slowly get waken up, they start seeing their family around them, and then now they have guides to help them through it, rather than just him trying to wake up, stupid, like you're an entity. You've been dead for 50 years, wandering around. And he talks to them, and he's a little bit of a dick sometimes, but he tries to be more logical with them. Just think about it. You know what I mean? You've been wandering for how long? But you're from this state? So why are you in California? But you're from Chicago. Think about it, dummy. And the spirit's like, yeah, doesn't make sense. And it seems like all the spirits, at least in the book, they have this huge brain fog. They just don't know what the fuck is going on. They can't think right. And it makes sense if you don't have a brain and you still have the baggage from your life, right? But there's a lot of people in this book, also a lot of famous people. Some of the people he puts actual names, some he just puts Mr. V or Mr. K or Mrs. K, so he doesn't give the names away. But I've researched some of the people, and they're a Vanderbilt's in here. I thought that was kind of cool. And it even goes down the list of how he died, and you can look it up and you can see exactly how he died and how he was a famous person, so we have a lot of information on him. Blavatsky was in here as well, essentially saying reincarnation is bullshit. That's like a soul trap. But it's very interesting, and it can be very scary if you're afraid of that whole darkness thing after death. That doesn't worry at me at all, because nothingness is not an experience, so how could you be fearful of an experience that you can't experience? You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense at all. It's like a illogical fear. But this book it's very interesting, very dense. I really like the whole, and forgive me Christians out there, but I like his whole idea on, because there's a lot of dogmatic Christians, obviously, like a lot of people in religion. But he goes over with one, and one lady's just kind of super fucking crazy about the crucifixion of Christ. She's like, think about it. Do you think God can mess up? And she's like, well, no. Then why the fuck would he send his only child to die on a cross for your sins that you never committed? Like, what are you talking about? It doesn't make any sense. And that never made sense to me either. It's like, God don't fuck up. Sorry. It just doesn't happen. Everything he does, even if it seems super nefarious and bad to us, everything has a point. Everything has a reason. So that makes total sense to me. And the crucifixion story, it's absurd. It's just martyrdom. That's all it is. It's the whole basis of Christianity. Anyway, sorry if I offended the few. The next book, that's a very good book, by the way. I suggest reading it if you're into the after death and stuff like this, which I very much am. Next, Carl A. Ruck and Mark A. Hoffman. Entheogens, I can't even never say that word. Entheogens, Myth and the Human Consciousness. Good book. It's a good book. It's what the title says, essentially. It's human consciousness, entheogens, and myth. So he goes over, there's a lot of different stories in the myth and what they actually mean. Because myth is essentially stories for life for us and ways to live life and lessons of life. Look at that. Odin holding the shamanic drinking goblet while seated on the Sleipnir. So it's a pretty good little book. It's a little boring at times because these are two academics, so they're kind of dry reading. But other than that, it's a very good book on the subjects. And, this is, I think, was it Mark Hoffman? I don't think Ruck was involved. The Road to Eleusis, the book, with another author. I forget his name at the moment. Yeah, because I think Hoffman created LSD, right? And Ruck he's an academic, but he is a specialist in ancient Greek. I believe that's correct. Either way, super knowledgeable people. It's well worth reading. I'm going to have to read it again to really seep more ideas into my mind. A lot of quotes. Carl Jung, obviously, if you know that name, which you should. It's a very good book. There's more in the field. There's a lot more in this field, so it's really worth checking out and reading. Now, Getica, The Origin and Deeds of the Goths by Jordanes. This is kind of the only real works we have surviving of like the Gothic people in general. There was, I think, 12 books on the Goths back in the days. And when I say back in the days, I mean, obviously before our time. Because this was shortly after 551 AD. Yeah, written in late Latin by Jordanes, shortly after 551 AD. But this is kind of like an amalgamation of those earlier texts into one smaller text. This is not a very big book. It's 102 pages with a picture in the back. It's not huge. Pretty big text and spacing, nothing crazy. But it is good if you really want to know about the Goths. I'm a big fan of the Goths and Gothic architecture, the Scythians in general. I think they're fucking amazing. They were an amazing culture, and I don't think people realize how amazing they really were. I mean, they ruled Rome at one time. Give me a break. Was it Theodoric the Great? Amazing. It's another book I want to get into. This is like a definitive work. I keep saying that word, but I feel it is. And just the beginning of the subject, because there's quite a few other books on the Goths, the Gothic history of the Jordanes. We've got plenty of other books over there on Goths. Got books on Gothic architecture from the 1800s. Gothic architecture is my favorite architecture in the world. I don't think anything has even come close to the beauty of that. I mean, there's some amazing stuff in Buddhist temples and temples in India that are fucking so old. We don't even know how old they are, and they're amazing. Like, just the stonework alone looks like it was 3D printed. It's just magnificent. But Gothic architecture touches my soul because of my Germanic roots. So, and some will in the back. Again, foundational work. It's well worth the read if you're into the subject or if you're European in general, because you're going to have some of that blood in you regardless. Can't stop fucking each other, right? Next. This is Stanislav Petrov, The Man Who Saved the World. It's a very small book, but it's a really good book. It's a great story because essentially this guy stopped nuclear war. Mass nuclear war, like fucking world ending. Because essentially he was a technician in the defense lab. They have a name for it, I don't remember it. It's some Russian shit. What is it called? Does it say here? Serpukhov 14. Yeah. So that was, and it was Serpukhov joining let's see, Stanislav Petrov joining the Soviet Air Defense Forces, which was Serpukhov 14, I believe. And it was September 26th, 1983. Wow. So it was just after I was born. I was born in June. Oh, September 20. Yeah. That's so cool. Anyway, this guy kind of saved us all. Because if he acted the way everyone else wanted to act that day, there would have been all-out nuclear war and the world would have been fucked. Ruined for hundreds of thousands of years, I'm sure. We would have been mutants or whatever. Whoever survived would have been mutants. It just would have been absolutely horrible. But he had the foresight and the patience and centeredness in himself to realize what was happening. Because his system that they had was very faulty. There was a lot of false alarms going on. So it would have been a bad day if he was like, oh shit, we're being attacked. Let's attack back. Because there's the way their systems are and how far apart our continents are. You kind of have to fire right when you feel anything or see anything that's being confirmed as an active threat, because you're going to get blown up before you're able to, set anything off to blow them up, right? So he essentially had the wherewithal and the temperance in his emotions to not just blow it out of the water. Like, wait, let's wait it out. Let's see. He got confirmation. It turned out to be nothing. And they still ruined him. You know what I mean? They put him through trials. They ruined his fucking career. He died old and alcoholic, most likely, like most people that save the world or try to help everybody out. But it's well worth reading and knowing about. Even if you don't read the book, it's not a huge book. It's pretty decent, pretty big font, big spacing, a little over 100 pages, like 120. Nothing crazy. This is a mass production print on demand, June 2024. So I just really wanted to read the book on it because I saw a YouTube video on it. And then I was like, man, that's great. I had no idea about this man. So somebody put together this book, which is worth reading. It's not like it's an amazing book or anything. It's just kind of going through the story. And it shows his upbringing, which is nice. The documentary didn't do that. So that was really cool. And I'm happy he was around to not get us all murdered. The Secret Son. This is Christopher Loring Knowles. He has the Secret Son, I think, .com or org or something. That's his website, where he has a lot of cool breakdowns on things. The Synchromistic Handbook. He made this literally like a little handbook so you could fit in your back pocket like we used to have back in the days with all these little cool books. But it's kind of something you want to just read over and over. Like if you got 15 minutes, that's how he wrote it at least. If you got like 15, 20 minutes in between whatever, you could kind of just pop it out and read. And there's a lot of different little subjects. Everything is symbol, of course. If you don't know that, you should. 3 Kings of Sync, Scale of Significance, the Causality Triangle. There's a lot of cool little things in your meditation, the Dream Horror Obsession. A lot of cool little things in here just to kind of like open your eyes to certain things. Don't play with gematria. Yeah, I believe that as well. Gematria, I think, is kind of a joke. You can kind of prove almost anything with it, right? It's one of those things. It's kind of a trick. Magic and Mystic. There's a lot of cool. I mean, he's a great author. He wrote another good book. Our Heroes Wear Spandex. I believe that's what it's called. And it's essentially the new heroes of the modern age are superheroes, right? Go look at comic books. Tell me they're not like the modern day superhero. Who doesn't love Batman? Like, come on now. So it's a good book. It's worth reading. You're gonna have to go over it multiple times, but it's a good book. Next, more academic stuff. Super boring. Sorry, but it is. This is Macrobius' Saturnalia, book 1 and 2. So if you don't know about these, the Loeb Classical Library, they have, throughout the whole book, on one side, it's going to be the Latin or Greek. This is the red, so that's going to be the Latin. And the English translation on this side. And this was translated by Robert A. Castor. So I have the other books. There's 2 others right here in that volume. And because it goes, this is book 1 and 2. It goes 3 to 5 and then 6 to 7. So the Saturnalia, if you didn't know, is like this old pagan religion. Essentially the Yule time or Christmas time, whatever the fuck you want to call it, but it was Saturnalia, where it was role reversals, and the rich were the poor were the rich, and there was hedonism all the way around, baby. Everyone was just having fun and blowing steam off. And I mean, if we had things like that these days, I'm sure there'd be a lot less strife out there, because people would have room to blow off some fucking steam once in a while. These days, there's not a lot of that. A lot of people are just struggling constantly, and people can only take so much before revolt happens. So it's a good book if you really want to know about these ancient times and the gods and how they thought of the gods and traditions, and it gives you the scales of their class system and the titles and why they got the titles, why they named certain things. So that was pretty good. Worth a read. Next, probably my favorite book of the whole year. Probably one of my favorite books in general, but my favorite book of the whole year, and I got a nice hardcover of it, is Walden. It's a beautiful book. Henry David Thoreau. I'm sure you've heard the name. If you haven't, well, check him out. But this book really spoke to me a lot. Not to mention I got it like dirt cheap. It's beautiful. It's the Franklin Library. Doesn't smell. It's nice. What year is it? Beautiful green end papers. Love those end papers. Kind of like Easton Press's end papers, but different color. A better color. 1981. So 2 years older than me. And it still looks amazing. And this is actually an illustrated version. A couple illustrations in here. If I can find one, I'll show you. They're not great by any stretch of the imagination. It's like a watercolor, actually. You know, cool little illustrations throughout. But it's essentially, Henry David Thoreau he was a scholar. I think he went to Harvard, I think so, because he was in the Northeast. But, he was a very intelligent man. He was really well off for the most part. It wasn't like hurting in any regards, but he really wanted to learn from life. And not in the sense that everyone else has, like going to school, and he did all that shit, but like going to school, living the whole life in school and learning from the peers and going into business. He could have done all that. He just wanted to really learn from life. So he essentially took no money. He had some money. I think it was like, he breaks it all down, like to the cents. I think he was like fucking $20-something. It was something ridiculous when you think about the price. I mean, this is a while ago, so that was a lot more money than it is now. Can't even buy certain loaves of bread for under $20. But he took that money and he built a little cabin. Very, very little. Like, I mean, things like 10 feet by like 7 or something. It's very small. Enough to keep him warm with very low maintenance. Just enough for what you need, right? He had 2 windows in it and a door. That was it. Maybe one window and a door. Whatever. I remember his bed was right next to the window. And a little hearth and fireplace, obviously. But that building is no longer standing. They have a replica there in that spot at Walden. Walden is in Massachusetts. It's the Walden Pond, essentially. But he goes through it, living through winter, sourcing the materials, building the cabin, living, learning. He would always grow his own little food. I think he mainly grew beans and lived off of that. He would tend his beans every morning, pull the weeds out of them. It's very interesting, but I very much connected to it because that's the simple life I want, especially in my older years of life. That's where I want to be. So it really touched my soul in that way. And it's it's a decent sized book. It's just over 400 pages in the conclusion. It's a solid book, though. It's really worth a read. It can open your eyes to a lot of different things. He's got some amazing quotes. Like, you can just type in Thoreau's quotes, and he's got some amazing, just philosophical quotes. And I really, really dig it a lot. And I'm a huge fan of this leather green book. It's just beautiful. Totally worth a read if you haven't. Probably one of my favorite books of the whole year, hands down. Hands down. Next is Bridget Bass, The Crow, The Life, Death, and Rebirth of a Classic Film. This is her second newer edition, so there has a little more information in it, more interviews that she wasn't able to get back then. But this is my favorite movie of all time, The Crow. I probably said that before, but if you're into this and you like this movie at all, buy this book and read it. It's worth it because you get a lot more. Like, you get to actually figure out how he actually died. Not the gossip everyone's hearing about, but the actual events and how they actually happened. Because she speaks to everybody. I think the only people she doesn't speak to is the director himself and a couple other people who are not necessarily that important. The director obviously is important, but whatever. Some people just didn't want to talk about it because it was very tragic for them. Some of these people, it was their very first film. A lot of cool pictures as well. There's a little picture area. But a lot of people, this was their first film and their first real break. A lot of people went on to become super big in the movie industry after this movie. And this book gives you so much about the story. I don't really want to spoil it in case anybody wants to read this, but this book is fantastic. I mean, I really learned a lot about this movie just by reading this book. And she does a great job. And it's not a boring read at all. She's a very good writer. And I think this is like the only book she's ever written. Could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's one of the only ones she has. But it's a fantastic book. This is a definitive book about the movie and the tragedy behind it and some positive things after, there's always positive things after tragedies. But we lost Brandon. He would have been an amazing big actor for sure. Way bigger than his dad ever would have been for sure. Because he was fucking amazing in this movie. And that's why nobody wants to see another Crow movie. Nobody wants it because this is Brandon's movie. Sorry. This is his. He literally died for it. It's his. If you don't like that, go fuck yourself. End of story. It's his movie. And the movie still holds up. I just watched the 4K the other day. It still holds up. I mean, there's a couple shots where because again, they had to reshoot some shots they didn't shoot after his death to complete the movie. They weren't even going to complete the movie. They were going to scrap it. But they wanted to do it for Brandon in his honor. So they did that, and it's fucking amazing. I'm so happy they did because now we have the movie forever to watch, right? Or forever, whatever that means. But again, beautiful book. Really breaks it down. If you're into this, check it out. You'll enjoy it. And I don't know if that's out of order. Okay. It doesn't matter. Next, Cassandra Peterson, a memoir, Mistress of the Dark. Yours truly, Elvira. I've always loved Elvira. Always. Ever since I was a kid. Big tits, gothic, and vampirous. Like, who the fuck doesn't want to see that as a young boy, right? But this is essentially a memoir of her life. It's a very good one. She's had some tragedies in her life, some really gross things, messed up things. Ooh, boobies. She's lived, she's essentially like the Elvira character is it's part of who she is, essentially, like the showgirl. That's all she wanted to be was a showgirl. Showgirls can only be a showgirl so long, though. So I guess it's good she went the Elvira route and did her own thing. And slowly, she got to keep her own rights to her image. So that really worked out for her. So again, if you're into her or her movies or anything like that, it's a good memoir. It's really nice. There's some sad things in it because she made some poor choices in life and life kind of shit on her a little bit for it, but That's life. We all have to live with our choices and deal with other people, unfortunately. But it's a very good book. She comes out in the end of this book, saying that she's, married to a woman and stuff like that, which is cool. I ain't got no big deal with that at all. But, and she outs a lot of other people. You'll find out if you read it. Yeah, lovely. But, she kind of just lays it all out there, which is cool. I respect her for that, She's got to be 70s by now. She still looks great. But, yeah, good for you, Elvira. Cassandra. Good book. It was a fun read. Next, Prometheus Rising by Robert Anton Wilson. This is a book you definitely have to read more than once. It's more like a study, I guess, because he actually gives you mental exercises in this book, and I think that's important, especially if you want to try and keep your cognitive skills the older you get. The Thinker and the Power, Hardware and Software, Brain and its Programs, the Oral Bio Survival Circuit, the Anal Emotional Territorial Circuit, Dickens and Joyce, the Two-Circuit Dialect. I mean, this is heavy stuff, right? It's not like for somebody can easily be distracted or bored with real deep intellectual thought, which I can be. I'm just like anyone else. All the books I read, though, I read them straight through and then I go back to them. I don't like to read and stop and read and stop. I want to finish the damn book, and then I'll go back to whatever chapters I feel I need to really dig into. But obviously, this is a very intelligent person writing a relatively hard book to understand. But if you can get through it and you can understand it, and there's a lot of cool things about psychology in this book, if you're into that subject, that you can go down really cool rabbit holes and learn a lot about yourself and your surrounding humans and the minds we carry and the other minds around us. So again, deep work, cool book, good author. It's worth a read. Some people say that's their favorite author. I don't know. I don't have an opinion yet. Only read one book. Next, Passport to Magonia, From Folklore to Flying Saucers by Jacques Vallée. If you're into anything UFO, this is kind of a major work in the field. I want to use that word definitive again. This is from 1969, so this is first edition, I believe, of this very book. Even though they clipped the fucking price, you see that? Anyway, it's a very good copy. I got it fucking nice and cheap, but this is actually, I don't necessarily know if I need, the back of it, you don't even really have to read. You only have to read really up to about here. So half the book here is really the book. The rest is accounts of like October 10th, 1954, Roger Tibbet. Jailer in Comforter's Detention Center was riding his motorcycle when he suddenly saw an aluminum colored object shaped like a plane. Maybe it was a fucking plane. With a dome and two portholes. It was about 2 millimeters in diameter and 1 millimeter high. It took off immediately. So like the end of the book is a lot of it just accounts, which is cool because if you really want to learn and build a directory of accounts and build your knowledge on and try and piece things together, it's good to have a bunch of accounts. Like, oh my goodness, where is he at? Charles Fort. If you ever read Charles Fort, like most of his book, The Damned, is just all accounts of all newspaper clippings and everything else. And he was you can go to the library and pick up the exact works he picked up in the New York City library. You just got to fill out a piece of paper. And you can actually see his notes and touch the things he touched and do the research he researched. That's how lucky we are in New York, right? But this is kind of a groundbreaking work in the day. It's essentially like the UFO and the flying saucer objects and all that. He connects a lot of it to fairy folklore, which I thought was fascinating. I've heard that before because everyone's been speaking about his thought on that. But ever since I read it, then it really sinks into my head. Because you can hear a lot of shit, but it kind of just goes one ear out the other because it's like background noise sometimes. That's why I really like to read books, is I can get to sit and focus and really think about it. So that was a very interesting thought to me, because there's way more in this world than we can ever even imagine. And people like to poo-poo a lot of different things because they just didn't have the experience themselves, right? But if you've ever had it, there's something more to it. And we all can feel there's something more here, unless you're just an NPC walking around, if those things even exist. But anyway, it's one of the main books in the field, besides a lot of John Keel's works, which are very good as well. I haven't read any of his books this year. I've read like 4 last year. Great book, though. Well worth the read. Very deep. You gotta think about a lot of it. Now, The Crow was big for me this year, so I'm not into comics. I'm not a kid, so no offense to anyone that's into comics, but I was into comics as a kid, but when I became an adult, I put kid things away, right? As they say in the Bible. But this is not just a comic, this is a graphic novel. And this is James O'Barr. This is the special edition. It's kind of fucked up because it has all the books in here, right? All the comics, all the graphic novels, but one of them's out of place. So like the 5th book is over here when it's supposed to be in the back. So you kind of have to fucking flop around. It's a bummer, but whatever. All the works are in here. So it's a beautiful work. It's a hardcover, printed in China. So when you get it, it smells like a fucking chemical factory. You got to air it out a little bit so you're not getting lung cancer. It still stinks like crazy, but there's a lot of ink in this book. Look how much black is in these pages. It's a lot. So, but it's a beautiful work. I mean, his artwork and storytelling is amazing. And I never, like I was saying, I never really read. Look at that picture. I never really read the original work, and this is the original source work of that movie. So I wanted to go over it and see how it looks and see the story. Now, obviously, the story's different. It's not the same as the movie. So they die in different ways. Obviously, he dies in a totally different way than in the movie, at least in a different place. But characters are all pretty much the same. They look a little different. It's really good. It's based off, well, the story came out of a tragic thing in his life where his woman was actually murdered, essentially. So kind of goes down the same rabbit hole. And that was his way of kind of dealing with his own trauma, was to write this or to draw this. So that's pretty powerful. And that's probably why the movie carried so well, because it's a powerful message, So it's a beautiful work, and I'm glad we have it out here. And I'm glad it is in a nice hardcover edition, even though it's a little bit out of order, but I can live with that. It's not the end of the world. This thing I got it for like $20 or something. It was nothing. It was nothing. Next is another memoir. This was a very good memoir. It'll make you think a little different about the man too if you read it. But try not to judge him. Making It So, a memoir, Patrick Stewart. I'm a big Star Trek fan, especially The Next Generation. I grew up watching that with my mom, so it's near dear to my heart. But this book is, what's cool about this memoir is he's in his 80s now. He's an old dude, so he's still all there, you can tell. But like some people write memoirs like they're in their 40s. Like, you're in your 40s, what are you fucking doing? Like, you're halfway through your life, maybe you got a lot more. Who knows? So it's nice to see him write it at the end of his life. I'm sure he's got plenty more years here, but who knows? But he's had a long life, and this guy basically comes from poverty. Like, he's grew up in a flat with like 2 bedrooms. What was it? 2 brothers, I think, and him in a room. They didn't even have running water, no bathroom or anything, no shower. Fucking cold. England, or he was North England actually. So. It's just really cool. Like, he come from such humble beginnings, and he just really wanted to be an actor. You know what I mean? He went through a lot of hardships to do it, and it was really, really good. And you learn a lot of different things, like how he's, couple infidelities on his wives, one with an actress in the show, which they had very good chemistry in the show, so that kind of explains that. But we all fuck up, and he admits it, so that's cool. It's just a very good book, and I'm very much into it. I really enjoyed reading this book. It was good and was not that expensive. It's a relatively big book. It's $440 or so, something like that. But it's a good read. I kind of breezed right through it. It was pleasurable. He's a very good writer. He really is. He's a good actor, but he's also a good writer, apparently. I don't know if he had a co-writer or anything. I don't think so, but he doesn't mention it at least. But it reads real smooth, real nice, and I enjoyed the hell out of it. So it's worth a read if you're into him or the Star Trek or anything he's ever done, really. I have a lot of his movies. It was good. Next, another Loeb Classic Library, Ptolemy, Tetrabiblos. So this is a green book now, so just like all the Loebs, this has Greek on one side and the English translation on the other. So if you don't know, Ptolemy essentially ruled all of Egypt at one time. And after his death, that's when everything kind of went to shit because all his generals were vying for power, right? Because he didn't really leave it to anyone. Or if he did, that person didn't work it out so well. But this is like a main work on astrological work, on astrology, essentially. Back then, it wasn't really astrology; it was astronomy. That's just the way it was, right? Everyone these days makes everything weird. All our founding fathers, everybody uses astrology. Everybody until the modern era. And now it's like, oh, you're into astrology? Fucking weirdo. Yeah, okay, I'm the weirdo. We've been using it for thousands of years. People wouldn't open their business in Europe. They wouldn't even open their doors for the day if they didn't have a good astrological chart for their business on that day. But we're the fucking weirdos, right? You ever heard of a farmer's almanac? Like, come on, people. Wake up. Anywho, this is a definitive work of the teachings of astrology and how to understand certain things, signs of the masculine and feminine planets. I mean, it really breaks it all down. It goes one step by step by step of it's his breakdown of all the things that his understanding for astrology or astronomy, the houses and the several planets, the triangles, exaltations. It just goes on and on and on. It is a boring book. Boring as all hell. It's super fucking boring. It's not a pleasure read. This is the kind of book, if you're into the subject, you go to the table of contents, you look for what you want to read up on real quick, and you learn. And you read it again and again and again until you have it sunken in your head. Then now you have it, and now you can go apply it. That's the whole point of this book, really. You don't want to just do what I did and read this all the way through and at the end of it, you're like, oh, I'm so fucking glad I'm done with this book. It's so boring. Because again, it's an academic book, so it's a big study on the subject, and it's all his understanding on those subjects, those fields in that subject. So that's Ptolemy. Anyway, he was a very important man in history, very, very important. If you're into that. Next, this is a very good book. J.H. Brennan. Whispers, the Secret History of the Spirit World. I got this book on Amazon, unfortunately, because I saw it there for like $9 or something. And it said hardback, brand new. And it's basically a hardback and it's basically brand new. But the way they shipped it like in a, I can't stand this. They shipped it in a bag. Like, it's not a t-shirt, asshole. It's a fucking hardcover book. You think these assholes delivering stuff care about your hardcover book? So all the edges are all dinged up and shit. Every edge has a fucking wrinkle in it. But I complained about it and I got the book for free essentially because they just refunded my money. So I guess I won in the end. And this is a fucking amazing book. I really enjoyed this book. Really enjoyed this book. It touches on a lot of the things I believe in. And this book actually got me into the book I'm reading now, Julian James, the Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of Bicameral Mind. Now, this is that's a book. Well, maybe we'll come to that next year, I guess. But this book is pretty damn good. Now, there's a lot in here. But it's essentially, that's why it calls Whispers, because I don't know about you, but I sometimes hear something in my head and it's not me. But I know it's not me because I don't think that way, you know what I mean? Because we all have this little fuck face. There's depictions of the good and evil angel, right? You have that too, your consciousness trying to fuck with you. but sometimes they're entities. Like, not everything you hear in your head is you. You should try and remember that if you don't know. So, and there's actually a study now, like, I think it's like 25% of people don't even have an internal dialogue. I find that crazy. How do you not have an internal dialogue? It's hard for me to wrap my head around that, but it's like, wow. Are you truly an NPC? I don't know. Hope not. But first contact, communion with the gods, the Egyptian experience, the mysteries of ancient Greece and Rome, spirits of the Orient, Dark Age conjurations, roots of Islam, the voices of the maid, evocation of Nostradamus, Queen's Emperor, enlightenment spirits. I mean, it goes on. It covers a lot of people, like Joan of Arc and everyone. Like all these important people in history, and how they were all guided by spirits or gods or who knows what, right? It's not like they're putting a real definitive name on it. Revolutionary sorcerers like John Dee with Queen Elizabeth, I believe. Was it Elizabeth or Victoria? I don't think Elizabeth. And Edward Kelly was the, I think he did the scrying. He was another charlatan in history, but he breaks down a lot of these people and their roles and what they did and how they were kind of guided in all these different ways. And I believe that. I believe the gods guide us in all kinds of ways that we can't even imagine, because we just kind of go through life very unconscious most of the time. Mostly everything we do is unconscious. We don't think about putting our shoes on. We don't think about brushing teeth. We don't think about doing 90% of the shit we do. And sometimes we do a lot of other actions towards other people that are not conscious, but we still do them. Spirits of the Fuhrer. So this is a very good book. I really like this book a lot. If you're into the subjects, it's definitely worth picking up. I really enjoyed this book. And then, like most books, when you read them, they get you into other books. So I really like that. Another one. On the Mysteries, Iamblichus. This is a translation by Thomas Taylor. I don't know if you can see that because I can't see the screen. It's a nice hardcover. It's a modern print. It's a faux leather. Feels nice. It's an actual hardcover. So it has a Smith's sewn binding. You can see that there with the leaflets and everything. Hopefully you saw that. This is great. This is Iamblichus. He's one of the great ancients out there. If you can, I don't know. Ancients is kind of a term I like to throw around just for people of the older times. But this was printed in 2006. So it's essentially his recordings, and we don't have all his works. A lot of his works are fragmentary. We only have pieces of it, but we have a lot of his works actually. But like in this, the Epistle of Porphyry to the Egyptian in Nebo, and it's a lot. I love these old books on the mysteries because this is how you learn about the gods, right? A lot of people who are it's not like people these days. But like a lot of these learned men back in the day, they were polymaths. They were so intelligent. Everything they did was just so beautiful. And even their thought patterns were just so much more sophisticated than mine for sure. But a lot of people I talk to, like everyone I talk to seems just they seem like retards compared to these people. Like, excuse that term if that offends you, but they just seem that way. And it's not like there's a lot per page, it's kind of really boxed in there. You can go through it relatively quick. Not that this is a race or anything, but it's just over 300 readable pages. The rest are notes or references. But it's essentially just mostly Porphyry talking to Nebo about subjects like, why do the gods do this? Why do they do that? How is this possible? How is that? Like just trying to get answers from an Egyptian priest or to an Egyptian priest, right? Yeah, it's Porphyry to Nebo. So as far as we know, Nebo was an Egyptian priest, and we know Porphyry is for the most part. Now it's credited to him, but we don't necessarily know. But it seems like his work. So I love books like this because, again, you can really try and understand the gods and who they are, and that to me it's a goal in my life. Like it's until I'm dead. Like that's one of my goals. It's not like it's a goal you're going to reach, until you until you meet the gods. Hopefully. So that's why I like these works, because it's it's one of the ways we can, in modern days, understand or try and understand the gods, and maybe use some of those insights into our own personal life and practices, and carry on from there. And hopefully, for ourselves, it's right for us, and hopefully we're honoring the gods in that way, and they can shine some light back on us. So, great book. I really enjoyed it. I just finished it, rather, actually. And this is the last book. This is the kind of books, we just had the holidays, right? So it's the darkest time of the year. Like, everyone thinks like Yule or Christmas or whatever is the jolly time of the year. It's not. It's the darkest and scariest time. That's where the traditions come from. They come from the dead of winter. So that was very scary in the northern Europe. I mean, Florida, dead of winter. Oh man, it's 60 degrees. Like, oh God. Did you see frost this morning? It's not so severe in a lot of different places, but where these tales come from, it was terrifying. You go outside for 10 minutes, you could die, right? And there was all kind of mythology and lore behind it. But this is Winter Legends and Lore, Chad Lewis, forward by Morgan Knudsen. So around this time of year, I like to read these tales. It's got a lot. Let's see. Is it about context? Context. Basically gives you the history of a lot of different things, like where the Yule log came from, where Christmas came from, where all these things came from. And there's not so many stories. I have another book on stories. Table of contents. Beware of the winter solstice. Don't forget the little people. History of Christmas caroling. Telling ghost stories by the fire. The magic of mistletoe, holly, and ivy. Why do we decorate the Christmas tree? Christmas Eve superstitions and rituals. The Yule log. The history of Santa Claus. The deadly Wendigo. Krampus, the demon of Christmas. Watch out for Belsnickel. 12 days of Christmas, New Year's superstitions. I mean, it goes on and on. It's pretty cool. And these are the kind of things I like to read around this time of year. So that's why I made this my last book of the year. It just fit. I've had this book for a couple of years. I've been waiting to read it during this time of year, and I did this year. So, look at Krampus Raw. So it was a good book to end the year. I enjoyed it. It's a fun little read. It's not long. It's under 100 pages. Literally 100 pages. Literally. It's a fun little book. It's nice. It's super cheap. I'm sure you can get it on Amazon still. I don't know. Go check it out. Maybe you can. It was $6.95, it says. But it was a fun little book. I remember I get a lot of my books from listening to podcasts and hearing the author talk, and then I decide whether or not if I want to buy it. So I did, and it was a fun read, and it was nice to just chill around the lights and the fire, and I had some candles and just take in the season. It was nice hanging out with my doggy. But those are the books I read this year. Hope you guys enjoyed this a little bit. Again, I hope you have a good New Year. I hope if you do any kind of resolutions, I hope you conquer them, kick ass, and do more than what you want to do. And if you don't, well, whatever. There's always next year, hopefully. And I hope you had a good time with your family for the holiday season. If you're American, I hope you had a good Thanksgiving as well. And glad Yule and new seasons. And hope you guys have a great next year. Hopefully, world starts changing a little bit, and we start getting a little less fucked up in the head and start caring more about each other. Anyway, sorry it's been a while. Like I said, nobody was really watching my videos, so I didn't really get the urge to post anything. That's just how my emotions work, So maybe you enjoy this. If not, whatever, I'll post it anyway. Anyway, love y'all. Happy New Year. Take care. And thanks for watching.